All right, we're going to call to order the October 17th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight we're going to ask a former supervisor and first mayor of the city of West Sacramento, Mike McGowan, to lead the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding the California Indian Heritage Site in negotiations with the California State Department of Parks, and to confer with our legal counsel regarding one October 10th letter from Scott Rafferty, one item of exposure to litigation, and no action was taken on either item. So with that, we're going to move to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. And although we're prohibited by state law from taking action or having an extended conversation about issues brought up under item 1A, it is an important opportunity for a public forum. There's yellow cards available near the front door, and we ask that anyone that wants to address the council on this or any other topic tonight to please fill one out and turn it into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone gets heard, and to that end, we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that simply indicates which agenda item is currently being considered. We take the cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on a particular agenda item. Once the staff report's done and the public testimony or the council questions have begun, we don't take any additional speaking requests. So if you're here for a specific item, please be sure to get the card in as soon as you can, but before the end of the staff report. And then finally, we recognize that for some folks, speaking in public can cause hives and anxiety and other disorders. And so we do ask that there not be any boos or cat calls or even applause or other demonstrations, with the possible exception of two agenda items this evening that are celebratory, and then we try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have a couple requests to speak under item 1A, and the first is by Anthony Latanzio.
Yeah.
All right.
How you doing? I'm gonna do my service call. This is Mark. Hey, I've been at my address for 35 years. Nothing's been done about the serious drug problem next to my house. Mr. David Brinsfield hasn't paid his taxes for 5 to 8 years. It's heroin and meth, needle using, up and down the block. I live right next door to him. This is 746. I'm right next door. There's no numbers in between. You got to do something about it. 3 people moved out. House next door is up for sale again. Come on, man. Vietnam vet. What more do I have to say? Got to do something about it. He's got an ankle bracelet, an ankle monitor. I would invite you to come and stay with me for a couple of days and see what it's like. People going in and out 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I have 3 dogs. One in the backyard, a mastiff in my house, and him. Okay, I'm always getting woken up. I never know what's out there when I get out there. I feel like he hasn't paid his taxes. Is that fair to anybody in here that is a taxpayer on their property? You got to do something, man. You got to get rid of them. It's heroin and meth. What more can I tell you? You talk about a bike trail. If the kids don't get past this drug use, they'll never get a chance to use a bike trail. What good is that going to do West Sac? I think it's, my opinion, it's more important. Crush the drugs, crush the heroin, crush the needle users. Got to help me. You know? So, I could count on it, or I hope so, or
We're going to...
you think I got to just, cause for coming here?
So, we're not a court this evening, so all we can do is take the information
Right,
on
okay.
Solano Street. And
Right.
I know we're-
All I'm asking you is, do
We'll
you
be
agree
following.
with what I'm saying? Well, no, you don't have to, don't tell me. If that's how you feel, then don't tell me. But it ain't right. 35 years I've been paying taxes, living here, not right. You need to do something.
All right, we're going to follow up through the police department.
I've been working with Yonet and everything. It's still going on.
All right,
So you tell me. Thank you.
thank you. All right, and Maria Grijalva?
So make sure that on the last speaker that duly noted, they had the police force follow up. Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, and I
Thank
have
you for the
the
information.
address here. So.
Thank you.
Okay, Maria Grijalva.
That's a nice change. Good evening. Good evening. For the record, my name is Maria Grijalva, and I'm here to provide a statement which needs to be on record. In November 2016, I filed a complaint with the California FPPC, Fair Political Practices Commission, about a slate mailer titled The West Sacramento Democratic Voter Guide that was sent out by our current mayor. The mailer was meant to mislead. The candidates listed on the mailer were not the endorsed Democratic candidates. I was, and another candidate was. I spent $15,000 during that race. We had sole permission to use the term, the copyrighted term, Democratic. I believe the mailer influenced the election results. In December 2017, the FPPC completed the review of my complaint against the mayor and found the mayor in violation of FPPC rules and fined the mayor a small amount, actually just $600. But on October the 2nd, the record should show, the mayor filed a complaint against me, a retaliatory complaint, I would say, with the FPPC listing 8 reporting statements as either missing or incomplete. In addition, he claims a $6,000 expenditure I made overrides Citizens United and is considered a contribution of over $500, which is a violation of a municipal code, which we happen to have a municipal code that says that that if there's a violation, it should be reported to the DA, and that is precisely what happened. And so my question is, since the FPPC usually takes a whole year to find a ruling, and I'm being charged for a crime, and the FPPC has not found a ruling, and so I can't help but think that this is divisive behavior. But anyway, my question is the mayor exempt from prosecution? That's my number one question. I publicly request criminal charges to be pressed against the mayor for his violations that he's already been found of. Anyway, the mayor's actions, you need to know, as many know, is reflective of 20 years of divisive policies. And so I ask, and the most important thing is here that we have a voting, it's time to vote. And so the question is, do we need a new mayor? That's really the other question. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so those are the only requests we have under item 1A, so we're going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there reports or other communications this evening? Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Air Quality Management District met on October 10th. The two items we discussed were a report that's due pursuant to AB 2588, which is the permitted facilities that have certain amounts of toxic impacts in the district, meaning the companies that, or businesses that put out more than 10 tons a year of category pollutants, which includes NOx, CO2, and sulfur oxides. It's a mandated report. We also had another mandated report pursuant to AB 617, which is basically the industrial schedule of sources for cap and trade. There's really only 3 facilities in the district that we're dealing with. It's Campbell Soup, Pacific Coast Producers, and California Resource Production, which are all canning companies. I also attended the Yolo County Housing meeting on October 10th, and the main item there is we moved forward with the approvals for a 62-unit affordable housing project in Winters using project-based vouchers. That's it.
Councilmember Sandin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The YOLO Local Agency Formation Commission met on September 27th, and we approved a change of organization to detach the West Main Street Island annexation area from the Willow Oak Fire Protection District in Woodland. So it was kind of a cleanup matter there. And we also approved authorizing the Esparto Community Services District to provide out-of-agency water and sewer services to a parcel in Esparto. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, on October 8th, I attended as a board member on the Yolo County Transit District meeting. We approved a couple of just administrative items, but the item of note I want to bring to the attention of the city and the council is in an effort for the Yolo bus to attract more ridership. They're taking a number of actions and strategies under consideration. As you know, transit Yolo bus ridership has been going down the last few years. So the district is actively looking at ways to increase ridership and to really increase revenue to help the district out going forward. But one of the items they did recommend and we approved is a reduction in some of the routes that are throughout Yolo County. This is precipitated mainly because Sac Regional Transit had lowered their fares in recent months. Which then precipitated our need to also kind of match the fares since we were going to downtown Sacramento from all 4 cities throughout the county. So it just made sense. They're putting together a better taxonomy of the structure of the fare reduction. We've asked them to do that, but we have given direction that we are in agreement with it. We just want to make sure it makes sense to riders, especially sort of in the same city. If they're riding from one place to another. I think that was partly precipitated by what we're seeing. I know we're getting a report later on VIA, but I think we're starting to see some complementary faring so that those folks that are getting to buses can have a sort of a similar fare structure along with that. So again, in addition to the fare reduction, they're looking at service schedules and running times, mobile ticketing, and then the use of better marketing, social media skills to make sure that they get the message out about Yolo Bus. So other than that, that's all we had on the agenda. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And a couple, Monday was the Sacramento Regional Affordable Housing Summit. West Sacramento was featured twice at that event. We were invited to talk about innovative financing mechanisms for affordable housing, along with the cities of Davis and Sacramento and Rancho Cordova. So they're very interested in the work that we've been doing on the use of enhanced infrastructure financing districts, the cap and trade funds, of which we're still the only city in the region that's been able to win and then deploy those resources for affordable housing and for meeting the affordability gap. So we did a session on that, and then the AARP, as part of the summit, sponsored a session on age-friendly strategies, which when I got there, realized the entire session was about West Sacramento. Bernadette Austin from the Planning Commission and also the UC Davis Center for Regional Change and Jamboree Housing were both there. And so the whole workshop was around West Sacramento's work in the age-friendly strategy that council members Johannesson and Sandine have led, and how that is leading to more affordability, to more walkability beyond just the housing itself. So it was a pretty impressive morning for West Sacramento in that way. Also at the end of last week, the Bayer Crop Science, their whole team was out at Sam Cohn's Park, and the Parks Department, Cindy Tuttle and her entire team did a fantastic job to set the table for 100 volunteers to come again for the second year from Bayer Crop Science, which is a really terrific employer. As obviously they're a global, the global leader in agricultural science, but they're also a great local corporate citizen. And last year, the council knows that they helped to create rebuild Elkhorn Playground, and then this year they were out at rebuilding the dog park. Adding all kinds of amenities as well at Sam Cohn's, but that wouldn't have been possible without our staff doing all the work in advance, just like they did at Kaboom at every one of these projects. So great job all around. Tomorrow, the Assistant Secretary of the Army will be here in the region and coming to West Sacramento as scheduled as well. Congresswoman Matsui and we have been coordinating those efforts to make sure that he has the opportunity to see the progress that we've been making in the levee improvements throughout the city through the continued leadership of Councilmember Sandine at Wasafka, and of course our former colleague Bill Christoph for decades in that space. So the Army Secretary will be here to see the progress, but more importantly for us to see how how critical the West Sacramento flood system is to the regional flood system, because we're trying to get additional funding from the Office of Management and Budget and ultimately the Congress to begin the federal investments at the large scale for our levee projects to complete the $1.1 billion. So this is a very rare opportunity to have the top person in the Army Corps of Engineers right directly out of the Pentagon in our city to be able to see that progress and to focus specifically on our needs for funding into the future. And then finally, at SACOG, at the Transportation Committee, we met earlier in the month, and tomorrow we'll finalize these actions. But the council will recall we won one of the first rounds for the SACOG's innovative transportation demand management strategies, and now we just are about to win tomorrow the largest grant of any city in the region for SACOG's traditional transportation management, demand management strategies as well, with a focus that we're doing on inclusive TDM strategies focused on outreach and the kind of pop-up workshops that staff have done on West Capitol Avenue and at 5th and C, that sort of approach to try to promoting inclusive transportation demand management as well. So it's a $100,000 grant. It's a small total pot of money, but it was heavily competitive throughout the region. As I say, of all the 22 cities in the region, we were one of the few to win, and of the winners, we're about to win the largest grant. So that's good news too. And congrats to the transportation staff and Public Works as well. Okay, so if there's no other reports or communications, then appointments. We had a resignation from the Economic Development and Housing Commission, and I think I previously communicated an intent not to make any additional appointments until after the election. However, with that resignation, we now have 2 vacancies on that commission, and they do have an additional meeting prior to the time that we would be making the 2-year appointments in December and January. So I would like to appoint Nicole DiCamillo to the commission, to the Economic Development and Housing Commission, and also redesignate Matt Kiesling, who's currently the alternate, for the open seat on that commission. That will assure that they can achieve a quorum at their November meeting. So Nicole DiCamillo, whose application is in front of you, received in May, and then Matt Kiesling, who's the current alternate, would be the appointments, and I'd ask if there's a motion to approve them.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Those appointments are approved. All right, that brings us into item 2, which is presentation of a proclamation declaring November 2018 as Epilepsy Awareness Month. Is there a motion on the proclamation? Is there? Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Orozco and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries, and the proclamation is adopted. I'd like to invite Patty Palmadesi to the podium so we can present the proclamation on the council's behalf.
Okay, you might need
Things
this.
have changed.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks for being
Thank
here.
you.
So I'm going to read.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Because this is a, actually, we don't need to do this anymore, but this is a tradition in the city that goes to the other side that I think Mike McGowan created back before we had cameras all over, but so the audience can see you as well. So this is a proclamation of the West Sacramento City Council declaring November 2018 as Epilepsy Awareness Month. And I'm going to read the whole thing because this is an important moment. We're really glad that you're with us tonight. So whereas epilepsy is a neurological condition characterized by an enduring predisposition to generate epileptic seizures and by the neurobiological, cognitive, psychological, and social consequences of this condition that affects over 3 million Americans. And whereas epilepsy affects approximately 400,000 Californians, 90,000 of whom are children, teenagers, and the elderly. And whereas epilepsy is a condition of the brain causing seizures. A seizure is a disruption of the electrical communication between neurons, and a person is said to have epilepsy if he or she experiences 2 or more unprovoked seizures separated by at least 24 hours. And whereas epileptic seizures are most often associated with grand mal seizures, a seizure can also be as subtle as strange sensations or perceptions, altered awareness, brief staring episodes, abnormal motions or postures, stiffness, or confused speech. And whereas early diagnosis and treatment of epilepsy is critical to maximizing the long-term prognosis, and whereas 1 in 26 people will develop epilepsy during his or her lifetime, and people with certain conditions may be at greater risk for developing epilepsy. Early diagnosis and treatment of epilepsy is critical to maintaining long-term prognosis. Seizures impact people's lives in many ways, including creating barriers to employment and education and facing a sense of discrimination and isolation from their peers. And whereas Patty Palomedesi is a third-generation owner of Club Pheasant, active Rotarian and member of the community living with epilepsy for her entire life. And while Patty has experienced the challenges of living with epilepsy, she wrote the other four-letter word, Patty's story, to inspire hope, educate individuals about epilepsy, and advocate for a cure. And while Patty has experienced the challenges of living with epilepsy, whereas Patty was recognized for her epilepsy advocacy and efforts to educate her community and the world by California State Assembly member Jose Medina. And because of Patty's work, Assemblymember Medina recognized November 2018 as California statewide Epilepsy Awareness Month on September 7th through Assembly Concurrent Resolution number 277, Epilepsy Awareness Month. And whereas by recognizing November 2018 as Epilepsy Awareness Month, the community of West Sacramento will be further educated on epilepsy and encourage those who live with epilepsy to succeed in their belief of themselves in spite of their challenge. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of West Sacramento does hereby dedicate the month of November 2018 to be Epilepsy Awareness Month here in West Sacramento.
Okay, I didn't know whether to say anything or not. This is very touching to me because after living with it for all my life, I wanted to give back and help others to understand themselves, to understand others who have it, and to understand that they can go after anything they want in their life, and they have to believe in themselves first. And Assemblyman Medina was just an amazing man to have furthered this along with my book. And then our mayor and the city council, everything is very kind. They were all very kind about this, so thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And Patty, I'd like to add our commendation to you. You and I have talked about when you went to the legislature that day, all of your advocacy and your efforts really are tremendous, and I think we all benefit, the whole community here benefits by your advocacy, and I'm fortunate enough to have gotten your book, and you're sharing your stories with us. You're just such an inspiration.
Thank you, Pat. All right, we had two other individuals that would like to say something under this item. The first is Mike McGowan.
Well, just briefly, I'm very proud of Patty. I've known her, of course, my whole life, or her whole life. I'm a little older than she is. And like Beverly, I had the chance to read her book. And I actually didn't get to it right away, for whatever reason. But when I did, I was overwhelmed, I was impressed, and I was touched. And what comes to mind now for me when I think of Patty, I see Patty in a different way. And what I see her, and the way I see her now, is as a true leader in the effort to bring awareness and outreach and stand as an excellent example to others as to how to deal with these very, very difficult and challenging afflictions. You know, we normally think of leaders as elected or pillars of society somehow, or business people or scientists or doctors, et cetera, et cetera. She's not any of those. She's essentially a businesswoman, an average person in our community, but so active, as the mayor has discussed it, and so many other things. But in this case, she stands out her commitment, her efforts, her love for everyone, especially folks that are afflicted, is admirable, touching, and something we should all try to aspire to. So I'm here tonight to tell her I love her, and I'm very pleased of what she's done and what she does on a daily basis.
All right, and Martha Hinson.
Hi. So up until about 4:00 p.m. today, I had no idea this was on the agenda. I've never met Ms. Bombadesi, and a lot of people in this community know me through my advocacy for children with disabilities. But that started, everything I've done in the past 5 years started when my then 5-year-old son was suddenly on the ground convulsing. And we didn't know why. We were in the middle of a birthday party for my other son, and we didn't know what was going on, and we were thrust into this crazy, wild world of epilepsy. And we lost him, but he was able to be brought back to us twice. We lost him that day twice, and he was brought back to us. And ever since, this is what my life revolves around. And everything I do in the advocacy world, at the Capitol here, revolves around this. It's a rescue med for my son, and it saved his life. And this, they save our children's lives. So children in your community, this means the world to them and to parents like me. And there is no thank you big enough. Like I said, I am not a crier. I am by far not a crier. And I am someone who can absolutely speak publicly. I do it at the Capitol. But this is my home and my son's home. And so it means a million times more coming from somebody from my own community that knows what it's like to have a seizure in a room full of people or to deal with the aftermath. Epilepsy is mean, it's fierce, and it does not care who you are. It will get you. It will attack you suddenly and quickly, and it leaves behind ugly, mean little friends like ADHD, learning disabilities, nerve issues. My son has something called generalized convulsive epilepsy, which is a big way of saying we don't know why or how, but this is going to affect him for the rest of his life. So I want to publicly thank you for this. We lost our son twice, and he was brought back to us, and he has been my absolute inspiration and always will be. So I want to just thank you for this.
Martha, thank you for being with us tonight. We all know your advocacy. Tonight was just as one item. We have a lot more tonight to happen, but what a profound demonstration of who we are as a community, and old, new, north, south, men, women, whatever, that we're bound together by people who inspire us. And you know, if I feel like maybe I'm not doing enough in the world, I can go on Twitter and see what you're tweeting about, Martha, and know, okay, there's people to fight for, and if I lose, if I feel like I'm lost in the community, I can always go to the Pheasant Club and see Patty, and I will feel important. I will feel like I matter. I feel like I belong, and so having both of you here tonight. To be the physical representation of this issue and all the people in our community that it affects in so many different ways is so powerful, and we really, really, just on behalf of the whole community, but certainly the council, thank you so much for being with us.
All right, go on from that. Thank you both.
There's no effective transition. Now we're going to the consent agenda. But which is items 3 through 9. Are there items on consent to remove or items for separate question or comment?
I don't.
No, I'm not going to pull one, but on item 6, which is the water transfer between the city and the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency, just as we take those up in the future, I would appreciate if those go first to the Environment Utilities Commission. I hadn't seen the issue before, and it's certainly within their ability to look in and the policy issues around water transfers are important ones. So it's fine. There's no reason to refer it today, but I think as we contemplate those into the future, we ought to be getting the advice of the commission that has responsibility for water. So, all right.
I'll move this consent agenda. I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 10 then is consideration of approval of the renaming of Circle Park to William Willie DePrado Park. Ms. Tuttle.
Good evening, Mayor Cabaldon, members of the council. Cindy Tuttle, Director of Parks and Recreation. On September 19th, Mayor Cabaldon and Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, with this council's concurrence, requested that staff bring an item back to council for the consideration of the renaming of Circle Park, which is located at 1509 Circle Street, of course, here in West Sacramento, to William Willie DePrado Park. And so to that end, staff met with Patty Palmadesi and Michael McGowan, who you've both heard from earlier, to put together the facility naming application, which is required for the renaming of a facility. Per the policy, we took that item to the Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services Commission on October 2nd, and after a unanimous approval for you to consider that recommendation to rename the park to William Willie DePrado Park, the Parks Commission went on for at least 15 minutes about the wonderful contributions that Mr. DePrado has made to our community. So, for example, as you all know, Mr. DePrado, Willie, opened Willie's Market on 15th Street, which just happens to be right around the corner from the park site. And back then, we didn't have Twitter and Instagram and iPhones and Facebook and mechanisms to really communicate with each other, except we had Willie's Market, and we had Willie. And he was like the lifeline to the entire community about what was going on and what we should be doing and how to get involved in the community. He was on probably every service organization that's ever existed here. He was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, but most importantly, he played the drums for 30 years, okay? So as a musician, I totally appreciate that. We're going to hear, after this item, we're going to hear an item tonight about Memorial Park. And it's kind of ironic because it was Willie DePrado who was instrumental in bringing Memorial Park and Little League to West Sacramento. So it's for all of these reasons that staff respectfully recommends that you consider renaming Circle Park to William Willie DePrado Park. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, sure. So I don't have any questions, Cindy, but thank you, Cindy, for all your work in putting this together and working with Patty and with Mike McGowan on the application. And I talked to Patty early in the summer about this item, and as much passion as you heard from Patty earlier about National Epilepsy Awareness Month, she has around Willie on all the positive reasons. And it's infectious to talk with a leader in our community like Patty and her admiration of Mr. DePrado and all he's done in our community. For me, I'd seen Willie many times, and to be honest, I met him tonight. But I've seen him many times at the Club Pheasant, and every time he's around, he's leaving. It's like a parade is going through the Club Pheasant for all the folks that come to say goodnight to him. And he's certainly been an inspiration to an entire generation. He's been an inspiration to the community for all the things that Patty had brought up. So thank you, Patty, first of all, for your continued advocacy for recognizing folks in our community that have made significant contributions. Mostly, Willie, thank you. You're certainly a leader from what I've learned about you over the summer. A leader not just in the accomplishments, but the fact that you were in business and you had to sell goods. People needed, it was one of the only stores in town for a long time, way before Nugget or before the stores. And you managed not just to do that, but to do all the other things in the community, which should be the template for how businesses run in our city. And I think that is the inspiration we gather from you. That's what every time I'll see past the park and I'll see your name there, or I'll see you at Club Pheasant, that's what I'll think of, is somebody who was passionate about their community, somebody who not just worked in it and hired and employed people, but actually went out and made a difference in people's lives. And that's truly inspirational, well-deserved to have the park in that neighborhood be there for you. So thank you for all you've done.
Councilmember Roscoe.
Did I say something?
Not yet. No rebuttal till the end.
You read my mind.
This is going to go on for a little while longer, I think.
Oh, okay.
What an exciting night. Many moons ago, I had the great ability to sit on the Parks and Community Services Commission for a few years. And in that time, we named a few parks. And today, I have two little boys, and we do our little park tours around the state streets and throughout the city, but mainly in the state streets because we live right there on 15th. My boys, they love Circle Park, and they love it because it's called Circle Park. I mean, it's a shape, right? And so they identify with it and its shape. But it gives me no greater excitement to have the ability to go home and to share with them that that park that they love so much is going to be named after someone who was so instrumental in changing the complexion of our city. Moreover, they play baseball at Memorial Park, and I get to share with them that you are instrumental in putting, your footprint on a place that's so beloved in our city. Now, we have not met, but I am just honored to be in your presence, and I'm really, really excited to have the opportunity to share this park with the rest of the community. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandin.
And I'm really excited that we have this action before us. And Patty also we've had a few conversations, Patty, about this, and I'm glad that this was brought forward. My career, as some of my colleagues here know, was in higher education most of my career, and I would raise money for buildings and for programs, and to leave a legacy is a really big deal. And here in the city, we have places, and that the name will last forever. And it's hugely meaningful that we have this action before us to name this park for you, because you've done so many things, wonderful, amazing things in this community, and this will be here forever.
Thank you.
Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you. Yeah, without repeating, I think it's a really great award, and I'm sure that when you were going through your life and doing the great things you've done for the city, it wasn't because you thought at the end you would have a park named after you, but it was all very selfless, very much being a part of the community, just being an active member, and that is so cherished for citizens to step up and do that, and that's really what makes community. People that get into their community, try and resolve things, and there's no thanks. It's just do what you think is right. So this is really a great award, and it's great to have the naming of this park after you.
Yeah, this is extremely unusual because it violates our at least unwritten policy, and I thought we had written it down, but our at least unwritten policy that we don't name things after living individuals, which we've now broken twice in the last 5 years, the first being the Mike McGowan Bridge, and assuming that, if I'm counting properly, assuming the vote goes the right way tonight, Willie DePrado Park. Because rules are there for a reason, but breaking them is also there for a reason, and this is the prime example of why. Because it's not just a historical marker, it is a way for a community to say thank you. While you can hear it and enjoy it and see the children playing in your park. It's not just any park. This park is, in some way, it's not the flashiest park in the city, but it's such a meaningful place. I know this park because that one house on the park was the house I always dreamed that, okay, that's the house someday when I make it, I'm going to. And apparently, the other members of the council had this. When I make it, I want to live in that house. So this is I've always had this emotional connection to this park, and it is a place, because it is a circle, where neighbors in the state streets gather around, which I can't think of a better statement about what Willie DiPrado has meant to the community. That just somebody who can bring people together, help them see each other, and connect with one another. And as we live in a world now where people are having their food delivered by Amazon or whatever, this park in some ways is a marker of what we can't afford to let go of in terms of our connections with one another as we get more and more mediated by technology. So, and it's also just, I think, for the gentleman that would have been the first mayor of West Sacramento, had the voters voted yes on incorporation all those years ago, and as the highest vote getter in the election for city council, it's about time that the oath of office is now being transferred over to the oath of this park, on the Willie DiPrado Park, and I think we're just all very, very proud of a community that both creates and then recognizes and whose soul is fed by somebody like Willie DiPrado. So before we go to the vote, I know Mike McGowan, as the usurper, the other first mayor of West Sacramento, who's been a key leader in helping to make this evening happen and this action happen.
Well, maybe a little, but it should be obvious to all that if you really want to get something done, you put a bee in Patty Palmadesi's bonnet, and it's impossible to say no. She had talked to me about it early on. I said, well, you should talk to Chris. He's on the council, and so he was co-opted after that, and I think the rest is history. When we first moved to West Sacramento about 1953, before they had sidewalks, we lived on Alameda Street, which was right around the corner from the park and right around the corner from the West Sacramento Market. It wasn't actually Willie's. Willie's was a nickname, but it was a different name. And Willie was there with his guys. And it was the first place I went to. We moved into the house, and the folks next door, the Gibsons, remember the Gibsons? Oh, yes. Pam Gibson took us by the hand and took us around the corner to get some candy and ice cream at Willie's, and so that was our go-to place after that. And it's hard for me to describe just how significant that place was on a number of levels. Yes, it was like an iconic business in our community. It was a town center, as the mayor has said. It's where you went to get your groceries, of course, but it's also where you went to see your neighbors and to talk to Willie and get that Willie charge, because he was always in a good space and a good mood. For me personally, as I grew older, he was a great role model. He was somebody I could look to see what it's like to navigate. How do you operate in this world of public life, and in a way that brings some sort of appropriateness and dignity to it? And I modeled as much as I could after Willie. Of course, we've got a lot in common. Of course, he's Italian and Irish, but the BS level is just about on par. I think he would have made a pretty good mayor, and I probably would have made a decent grocer as far as just talking to folks. But I learned a lot. I respect him immensely for the way he navigated himself through this world. And Marty, with Marty Swingle, I would say that Willie is one of the top 3 drummers in the city of West Sacramento. I'm honored to be here tonight for you folks. I think I know the way the vote's going to go as well, and I couldn't be happier and more proud of you all, and proud of my good friend Willie DiPrado. Thank you.
Or before the rebuttal, let's take a vote, because it could be very embarrassing if the vote went the wrong way afterwards. So then let's, is there a motion on Mr. Ledesma?
I'll move the recommended action.
I'll second.
please.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Mr. DePrado, would you like to say a few words?
I'll try. I'm
Clock on.
What was that? My family, they're great. Good. If I'd have known at the time that I was doing all these wonderful things that you spoke about, I probably would have gone and hid in a corner somewhere. But I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It was the most surprising thing in the world when Patty called me up and said that they were going to name a park after you. The furthest thing from my mind. I had that store for 30 years. I loved every day of it. I worked long hours, hard hours, wonderful hours. I had 4 boys that come in and out. They were always there for their check. The work part was a little shabby sometimes, but they did the best they could. I came to West Sacramento in 1949. I was 25 years old. I had a wife and a 3-year-old child. I was 2 years removed from the Army, and all I was a grocery clerk. The man that I started working for when I was 14 years old, and when I turned 15, he took me to Motor V to get a driver's license because my dad could never afford a car. We never had one. He took me and he says, "You're my partner. We got this store. We're going to run it together. And when I think you're able to do it alone, it's yours. You'll have to pay me, but it's going to be yours." 9 months after we were there, he had a heart attack and died. And believe me, I didn't know which end was up. But it takes adversity sometimes to make you learn to be good, to be a businessman, to be a man with a heart. I lost as much money, gave away as much money as I earned. People with a sad heart had kids, they didn't have money to feed them. Go see Willie, and Willie fed them. It wasn't something that I did for what I'm getting this evening. It's something that I did for my heart and the lack of a brain. I didn't have the good, solid business brain. But you know what? I survived it all. I'm 94 years old. I don't know why I'm still here, but I'm happy to be here. Believe it or not, I play golf twice a week with my son. The damn kid won't let me sleep. But I enjoy it. I have fun. And Patty Palmadesi, I've known since she was a baby, and her whole family, her mother and father, and my ex-wife, or deceased wife, and I, we traveled to Europe, to Hawaii, to New York, a couple of cruises. We're on one cruise, and our ship hit something and tore a hole in the bottom of it. And believe it or not, we had to abandon ship. And we got another free trip out of it. But all these things that happen to you happen because you don't know what's going on. At least I didn't. I didn't know what was going on. All I did is I loved opening that key in the morning and meeting people and talking to people, making friends. That's all I live for. In the restaurant business, I told these guys, I don't know how to cook, and I'm not going in the kitchen. I hate cooking. But put me in the front, and I'll bring you customers, because I love people and I love talking to people. I've talked long enough. I better stop. But anyway, thank you very much, all of you. And Mike McGowan and Patty, thank you. It's been a real, real pleasure, and I'll go home and probably cry myself to sleep. Thank you very much.
Oh, and speaking of cooks, I see fresh off of starring on KCRA, Pete's here as well. Fantastic feature on the Pheasant Club as well, on Club Pheasant, so.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
True West Sacramento boy.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you again, Willie. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for you. Believe me,
Welcome.
from the bottom of my heart. Can I give you one little story? We were at the restaurant one night.
Only if you come to the mic. So folks at home get to enjoy it as well.
Willie, another Italian. We were at the restaurant one night having dinner, which we do every Friday night. Willie and his sister and my wife and I. And pretty soon this guy comes over and he brings a drink to Willie. And Willie says, and he knew him. He says, "What's this drink for?" He says, "I want to start paying you for all the candy I stole when I was a kid." That was Willie. He knew it, but he never said nothing.
All right.
Was that Mike McGowan by any chance? Just wondering.
I never caught Mike. He was smarter than I was.
All right, thank you. Thanks to everyone who's been part of this evening. We're now going to move on to item 11, and it is not considered rude in city council, as soon as the thing that you're come for is over, to just get up and walk out and turn your back on the council. It's not considered rude. Although next we're moving to Memorial Park. So item 11 is consideration of approval of preliminary design of the Memorial Park American with Disabilities Act upgrades project and inclusion of the additional preferred improvements in the project scope. Mr. Ambia.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Denik Sanbia, Public Works Director. Today, the purpose of this presentation is to seek City Council's approval to proceed with the final design of the Memorial Park ADA upgrade project. And with me, I have Christine Anderson from Mark Thomas Company to help me with explaining the design of the detailed design of the project. The project is a result of an ADA settlement agreement that was made by the city back in 2010. All the parks listed in the agreement needs to be upgraded to ADA requirements by 2020, except the Bright Park, which we have until 2025 to meet the ADA requirements. All the parks listed in the agreement are updated except Memorial Park and Bright Park. We are going to be talking about Memorial Park today, and then Bright Park has another 5 or 7 years to get it upgraded. Required upgrades included for this project are ADA accessible restrooms, dugouts, parking, and other amenities. City Council approved $1.3 million already in the CIP towards the ADA upgrades of this project. City, back in March of this year, did an RFP and hired Mark Thomas and Company to do the design of this project. As part of the design process, staff conducted open house on July 10th at the Memorial Park. Residents had the opportunity to give us feedback on various aspects of the design. The open house was well attended, and for those who could not come to the open house, they were able to give us feedback through the social media and also through online. Based on the feedback we received, we decided selected some priorities for the project with the available funding. On August 7th, staff went to the Commission, Parks, Recreation, Intergenerational and Services Commission, with a preliminary proposal for the design of this project. At that time, the commissioners gave us some feedback. One of their concerns was that the number of trees that were going to be removed through this project. That was one of the feedback that we received. So based on that feedback and also some of the feedback we received from the public, we went back to the commission on October 2nd with the revised proposal to save some of those trees and also added some enhanced features in the project based on the feedback we received from the public. At that time, the commission unanimously agreed with the proposal that we put forward, the staff put forward, and also recommended that the council approve the recommended options in the design. With that, I will turn it over to Ms. Anderson from Mark Thomas. She's going to talk about some of the design details, and then I'll come back and wrap up the presentation.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you also to the council members for a great evening of parks and community service. I've been to many city council meetings and have yet to have this much love in parks and community service as part of this. So I'm pleased to be here tonight on such an auspicious occasion. As Dennis mentioned, could I have the next slide, please? The primary purpose of the project is to bring the existing park up to current standards, specifically to the Americans with Disabilities Act standards. In addition, staff identified several key desired programming elements within the project, specifically site security to improve views into the park, and lighting improvements to ensure security at night. Also to enhance and work with the adjacent street improvement project, improve maintenance and operations abilities, analyze the health and long-term sustainability of the existing trees, and to address the Americans with Disabilities Act parking concerns around the site. We vetted the design through staff and meeting individually with representatives from West Sacramento Little League, and the preliminary design, we feel, addresses these concerns as well as after the Parks Commission hearings. So you can see the design here on your PowerPoint presentation above you. Can you go to the next slide? Of particular interest during our studies were the dugout design. We presented 3 different alternatives with associated costs. We had an at-grade dugout as well as a partially sunken dugout at 18 inches and one 3 feet, 36 inches. And there was a lot of discussion about that, including the costs in concern with that. In the accessible restrooms as well, there was discussion about restrooms only or having a combination of a restroom with concession stand and storage. As the budget of the concern of that, we selected as part of that budget concern an at-grade dugout and just restrooms to be provided for the park to be part of the base cost of the park to fit within that $1.3 million budget. Other site amenities, however, were identified. There was a paved central spine for maintenance, accessibility, and site security. Accessible site furnishings, benches, picnic tables, drinking fountain, and ramping into the existing play area. Accessible bleachers, which will be needed for each of the ball fields. Tree replacement, specifically like tree succession issues. And site security lighting that would be consistent with on-street lighting. Next slide. As we mentioned, at the open house, we collected comments from over 70 attendees and West Sacramento Little League representatives, and also received comments through the city's website and social media. There was strong preference for the following additional enhancements. Sunken dugouts at 30 inches, so kind of a hybrid of the two sunken ones. That would be approximately $118,000 addition to the base cost. Including concession and storage with the restroom construction, that would be an approximate addition of $100,000. Provide an enhanced and covered play area with approximately $94,000 addition. I should mention, too, that the concession, West Sac Little League felt very strongly that the concession stand was important for them because it actually helps fund much of their resources. Next one. Also, a shaded and group picnic area at $65,000 to enhance operations of the park even after Little League ends their season. Scorekeeper's booth and ball field storage at both main fields for approximately $45,000, and infield irrigation upgrades at approximately $6,000. With that, I will return to Dennis.
Sorry. So as I mentioned previously, the city council has already approved $1.3 million in the CIP budget. Staff at this point estimate an additional $600,000 will be needed to complete the construction of this project with the enhanced features that we talked about. With the council's approval tonight, we could proceed with the final design, and the construction contract could be awarded early next year. With that, the actual construction could start sometime in mid-July and be completed towards the end of or November of next year. The construction schedule that we are thinking of or we are contemplating will not impact the regular Little League season for 2019. Tonight, staff is seeking council's approval for the approval of the preliminary design, and also direct staff to proceed with the final design with the enhanced features referenced before. Although staff estimates an additional $600,000 is needed to complete the construction of these projects, we do not know at this point the exact dollar amount needed, and therefore, until the bids are open next year. So what staff is recommending is that once the bids are open, we will come back to the council with for the approval of the additional funding needed. However, staff has identified potential funding sources and options to fund the remaining $600,000 or so needed for the project. I also understand Little League is raising funds towards this project, which could offset some of the funding needed to complete this project. With that, I conclude my presentation. If you have any questions, we are happy to answer.
Are there questions at this time? Mr. Johannesson?
Yeah, thank you. Dennis, on the center aisle, what would be the configuration of the bleachers when you have two opposing fields?
Right, so there are two sets of bleachers in that location. I don't know if we can bring it back up, that PowerPoint. Is it too late? We've actually shown two sets of bleachers in that location, one that would face to the junior field and one that would face to the senior field. That's, right at the moment, I think there's only one set of bleachers in that location, so we wanted to add a set to enhance, have more seating abilities in that location. So I don't know if you can actually see that, but right in the first base and third base lines, in the center, there would be a bleacher facing the senior field and a bleacher facing the junior field.
Okay, and in between there would be the passage for walkers?
That's correct, yes.
All right, and then the other question is, what considerations do you have in terms of fly balls and kind of impacting the surrounding neighborhood, fencing and things like that?
Fly balls in the surrounding neighborhood?
Well, there's going to be, because if you're left field or actually right field and the left, you've got cars parked out there, and I don't know typically what you do to help. I know the batter cage you've got.
Currently, there is a cage on the top of the backstop there, and so we would keep that and make sure that is provided, enough source. There's really no way to keep all foul balls from going in there unless we put up a very significant fencing system in there, and I don't believe that there's a budget for that. We've done as best as we can with providing more trees in that location to help deaden balls as they fly out of the park. We've also tried our best to design for that purpose too, especially as it proceeds further on the first baseline of the senior field, to make sure that people are continuing down that presence and not getting hit by a ball in the back of the head as they're standing at that end. So we can do as much as we can. It's rather difficult unless we want to get to an extensive structural system.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Roscoe?
Thank you. Just a few questions. The play structure, will it be the same play structure, or will there be a different one, and how does it compare?
So right at the moment, what we're proposing is to keep the existing play structure and add a shade element to that play structure. And then the hope is that I think that there are some community funds available for upgrading that I think that they're trying to advance some funds for that, to be able to add a play structure like a net element or something along those lines in that area. So it would be an added component to that.
And then the walkway that normally comes from the snack shack over to the street, will that be, still remain as dirt, or will it be paved?
No, that'll be paved over. Basically where if you can see, I think it's item P, which is the concession stand, the big gray blob on there is kind of sitting right over that right at the moment. There's an existing tree right there. There's a redwood tree that has been topped. That was one of the trees that was recommended by our arborist to remove because of its status. And so we are actually proposing to place the concession stand in that location. So that whole area would be paved and reconfigured between where the existing play area is and where the snack shack currently is.
And only final question is there is it going to be, because the way it is right now is many of the area around the park is just essentially pavement and then grass. Is there any walkway, or is that just as is?
Right, so what we're basically proposing is that whole area between the two ball fields, all the way out from street to street. I can't remember the names of the street, Euclid and Regent, I believe. That whole area would be a wide paved area. So that's about, I believe it's about 15 feet wide. That whole area would be paved. With the exception of as you get closer towards the infields of the two junior and senior fields, those areas would have some shade trees planted and the bleachers. So that whole area would be paved to allow for easy maintenance into the park, maintenance trucks, vehicles, maybe some smaller vehicles that Little League might bring in their, whatever they're selling for in the snack shack. So accessibility into the park from that area. So everything would be, basically, all of that area would be paved, and then the paving around the play area, paving out to the parking area that's on Alabama Street. Is it to the east of the site? So bringing a paved area to there so that all of this would be accessible, because we need to create accessibility into the site. There would not be any. The idea is to create an accessible path network in the middle of the park, instead of providing for sidewalks along Alabama and Delaware. Because there's one impacted area, you can see it on the southeast corner of the site, that we cannot get a pathway through there. So the idea is that in order for accessible path of travel along the roadway, it would be on the other side of the street and then in the middle of the park, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Endine?
Oh, thanks. Thank you for presenting this. It's nice to kind of see this as we've been talking about this for a number of months, and to actually see the preliminary design. The accessible features actually, I think, really enhance the park overall for everyone. As someone who's volunteered and worked in the snack bar, having that upgraded will be a huge difference for folks. My question, and you mentioned it, I think, or maybe Mr. Dinnick did, about the consultations with Little League. So this really has to work. I think from my perspective, all this work is being done to make it work with Little League. So can you tell us a little bit more about those conversations and consultations? Oh, looks like Ms. Tuttle is coming.
Thank you. Not only have we had meetings with Little League, but we've also had meetings with the Sports Federation, because they're another group that actually does use the park, as well as talk to the neighborhood, because they also use the park, and that's why some of these elements, these extra elements that we've brought in, like the covered shade structure and the barbecue and those things, are on here. But specifically, the conversations with Little League have been ongoing for several months. They have been wonderful. They have, in fact, I think we have a couple of representatives here tonight that may be speaking. Mort Guyvet, who's the president of West Sacramento Little League, and Dave Jans, who's actually the chair of the Memorial Park Committee of Little League. And he and I probably talk a couple times a week in email and text, and they have been wonderful to work with. They actually sat in on the early design, informing us the things that they needed. We talked about the constraints we had with ADA. Then when we had like 3 or 4 preliminary designs came out, we sat down again with their team, and they gave comments on the 4 or 5 preliminary designs and what they thought would work and not work. And based on all that put into the same pot, we came out with this particular preferred design, which we have also gone over with them. And in fact, they've given us some even further detailed information. For example, I'll just utilize the snack shack. It's important that there's windows on 2 sides so that people don't congregate all in that one area, that you have one area where people order and one where they pick up. But more importantly, it allows parents to look out both sides. So if they have a child at the major field, they can see them, and if they have a child at the minor field, they can see them. So those types of things that we wouldn't think of in design, they have been very instrumental in providing us that type of information.
Before you go, my other question, you mentioned neighbors, so I want to talk about Little League and neighbors. So have those, I know that there were the open kind of workshops, so I'm guessing a lot of neighbors came to that as well. But
Correct.
anything else you can share with us?
The neighbors were actually the ones who were most concerned about the tree removals. And so we had extensive conversations with them, and that is actually why we went back and thought, okay, what trees can we really save, or can we do some specific work to save trees? And also, again, the neighborhood, they really wanted to have some enhancements around being able to have a covered picnic area where they could bring their families and sit down when no activities are actually going on, or sit in the shaded area and be able to watch their children playing on the play structure. So all that was taken in from the various and assorted methods utilized to gather input.
Thanks for the work on that.
Sure.
Yeah, this has been really a classic example of how this is all supposed to work. The original design concepts from the engineers and from staff review here for the very first time a couple of months ago, and then lots of outreach from the various parties that don't always have aligned interests, but I know our staff and consultant have worked really hard with the council's direction from before about the values that we're trying to protect. Of Little League, of the neighbors who don't have kids and are dealing with the increasing pressure in their own neighborhood, the neighbors an increasing number of neighbors in the state streets who have young children who want to use the park for Little League and for the rest of their lives, and balancing all of those and finding ways to find win-wins. Looks, there's obviously been a lot of work done in that respect. Dennis, I just a question on so you indicated that you because 45% budget increase is not trivial in this space either. So we were able to accomplish a lot of things, but not for free. And we also, there are significant parks needs that we know from the master plan at parks in neighborhoods throughout the city. So I'm curious, you said staff has identified potential funding needed to deliver the entire project. And what are those sources that you're contemplating?
So we are looking at ADA funds. There is money left in the balance for ADA funds, and a possibility of using Measure K money and other funds that could be available at that time.
Okay, and are you so under this action would be putting out to bid the entire project as a complete project, or most of the project with some options, or how would you deal with the unknown precise cost?
So we do estimate it is around $600,000, so it is not completely unknown, it's roughly in that ballpark. So when we bid the project, when it comes out, we will know the exact amount of the bid. At that time, we have to propose some of the funding options, and the council will approve. So if we are not able to identify funding, then we need to downscope the project at that time.
Okay. So I was going to ask Dave, and maybe Martin, I have a card for David, but Martin, if you want to join or come up separately from West Sacramento Little League, just to emphasize what Cindy has already said, how much I know the council and your own members and players and folks who played in Little League 500 years ago and will play in Little League 500 years from now, how the deep, authentic engagement that you've put into this project as partners, sometimes critical friends, and sometimes just trying to make it happen. We would not be here tonight if it weren't for you bringing that together, helping people to see past some of the arguments, but just figure out what solutions might look like. It's been a really terrific partnership in every way. So we're really appreciative of all the work that you've done and the heart that you put into it and the smarts and just the raw time and effort and probably frayed relationships and friendships along the way. So, David?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, in hearing Mr. DePrado speak and getting to hear his story, and it's really it brought a really honor to be able to kind of continue the Memorial Park legacy that was left to us to forward on. So that was really special for us. But we just wanted to come up to kind of provide our overwhelming support and endorsement of this plan. There's a lot of great things about it. As Cindy mentioned, we've been working together diligently with her and her staff to really kind of come and bring this all together. There's some unique elements that really are provided in this. The sunken dugouts themselves are really a big league special thing for the players. It's not very common in little leagues, and then to be able to do that and make them accessible to all children in the community or in our area, that's really something that's unique that I don't even know exists anywhere in Little League parks today. So that's a really special opportunity for the city and for us as Little League to provide to the community. And then beyond that, the rest of the ADA upgrades, which would make the whole park accessible to everybody, is something that's really special. We're also able to keep all 4 fields in this plan, which was something that was unique or special to us because we bring a lot of families and players in from the T-ball. If you have an opportunity to see or have your children play T-ball, it's really a lot of fun. And they get an experience with baseball that's an enjoyable one. And as we all know, sports with youth is very instrumental in providing a good path for them to continue into their adulthood. So that was really important for us to have as well. We are, as I was also mentioned earlier, trying to raise as much funds as we can. We have a few things that we're working with Mark Thomas on to try to find some turnkey solutions to do some custom brick engraving that we can veneer our snack bar with. And we're trying to raise as much money as we can so that we can be a part of any additional items that may come up or expenditures, maybe even features that we've talked to the community about. Some foul ball protection actually over the bleachers and providing some shade or some things that we've had ideas. Some water fountains that provide, refillable water bottles, some things like that. And then of course the snack bar itself is going to be kind of left on us to provide the interior workings of the facilities within it, the fryers, all the food makers, and those things like that. We're going to have to come up with on our own. So we're going to be kicking that initiative as quick as we can. And then we also want to just echo something that Cindy and everybody has been saying that, and you yourself, Mr. Mayor, about the overwhelming support that we've had from city staff throughout this project and from council and the elected officials as well. And I think it really provides a great example of a community-based solution to something that we were tasked with. So we're just happy to be a part of it, to have the seat at the table and to be welcomed, to provide our input, and we hope to be a part of that going forward as well. So thank you. Did you want to say anything?
No. No, I just want to, Dave has kind of taken the lead on all of this. I've been in the background, but everything that he's told me, we're in full support of this project, and just thank you to everyone involved.
Terrific. Thanks. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you, and Martin, Dave, thank you. First of all, thank you again for your work in this. I know you've put in a lot of time and a lot of days away from your family, your nights away from your family to meet with staff, or days away from your job to go meet with Cindy and the team to get this moving. And I mentioned this to you earlier, Dave, and I saw you at the store a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this, but the work you did is really emblematic. What a lot of people do to make this community go, that is you volunteer for a board, whether, I've done it for the Meals on Wheels or, we don't get paid a lot up here, as you probably were. So this is all kind of the work we do, whether you at the parish council or at the Rotary or whatever. These are all volunteer roles and leadership roles, and I just really appreciate the work you've done and the dedication you've shown to this project to work with Cindy and the team to get it right. It showed a lot of heart, a lot of perseverance, but just really appreciate all the work you've done as volunteer board members, and you don't have to put that much time in. I'm sure there are many times like I don't, it's a thankless job sometimes, right? But you do it. And but anyway, so thank you both very much. And on the project itself, Cindy and team, thank you so much, and Denix for all the work. This was a really big effort on our part to accommodate, which was the right thing to do when sort of, when there was some noise around this. There was just, the right thing at the end of the day had to be done. We had to make this accessible to every kid and every adult that needs it. The park deserves that. I've been there. My daughter played t-ball, fall ball when she was young, and I've seen many friends and nephews play at that park. And it's one that it's a special park because it has the values that we talked about with Willie and his bringing it over, the history of it. But it's the one park where everybody came to, and now Alice Norman's doing the same thing as well. Everyone's going to those parks throughout the city, and so for that reason alone, it's worth endeavoring on this design that you have come together on. And the mayor is right to ask the questions around funding, and we know that's an increase. But I am comfortable moving forward because A, the process was right, and B, the entire community benefits because kids play there from all throughout the city. Now, we're going to have to figure out how to make up some gaps, and so I know fundraising is on, so I'm totally supportive of that too, and I think there was a conversation we had around if you need a band to play at a fundraiser, you know, what do we call it, music?
I'm going to hold you to that, just so you know.
What was it?
I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah, well, so, but that's the commitment we make as a committee, as a community, is to help these things get, how do we make them happen, right? And so it all began with you, and I know staff did a terrific job, Cindy and Tracy and everybody, just thank you, and Denix for all your work on this. But I'm totally supportive. I'm really proud of the end product, and I say let's kind of get out the bid and see what we got, and we'll figure it out from, and Denix, we're going to count on you to help figure it out, so, okay.
Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been following this item since the outset, and you know, there's no place like Memorial Park when it comes to representing what West Sacramento values are all about. And I did attend the stakeholder meeting in July to listen to the feedback from our neighbors, and I live in the community, and so I feel like I'm a personal stakeholder. We utilize a park, especially during baseball season, or there 2-3 times a week. But I iterated once in our in an earlier meeting that the first time I volunteered as a parent to get my deposit, and I loved it. But I did remember how the snack shack needed a little facelift. The power was going out, we were bumping into each other, the kids were lining up in all these different places, and we just needed something a little bit more fluid. And Denix, I remember talking to you about the bathrooms when I first got elected, and what we could do to give our bathrooms a little lift because of practical reasons, the puddling water or whatnot. So this has been a long time coming. It's just a matter of how do we get the resources. So here comes the requirement that we have to upgrade it. And ultimately we come to where we are today. I mean, the discussions have been long and they've been hard. And I've contacted Cindy Tuttle various times at night to wonder where we are with this project. And Dave, you and I had an opportunity to discuss the needs of West Sac Little League. And I couldn't be more delighted to see this come to fruition today. Because I know that some of the big deals, the sunken dugouts, which are a big attraction to other teams around the region, people want to play in our park because of those dugouts. I thought, well, what a magnet. What could we do to leverage that and maybe, have a pro baseball team or, we talked about a minor league team or whatnot, just sponsoring it and maybe committing resources to help us along and just, so we could preserve that, but here we are. But that doesn't mean we can't still consider that since we have funds that need to be made up. But I guess maybe it was last meeting or the meeting before, we talked about public-private partnerships when we were talking about the I Street Bridge projects and other projects like that. I mean, this is one of those examples where maybe we could seek partnerships for the upgrades or for what we need to make up for. But, enough can't be said about the buzz and the energy that exists during, the baseball season. the families that go out there with hope and energy to see their kids enjoy this historical landmark. And I'm just thrilled that our city staff and our community stakeholders in our West Sac Little League have come together and found a wonderful compromise, something that I think our community is going to be very happy with.
All right. Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, a couple comments. Yeah, when this, I think this whole process started, it was a very polarized situation. A lot of advocacy on both sides that were passionate about one use or another. So I'd really like to commend you all for the collaboration and accommodation you've made, and along with city staff and working with the neighbors to come out with a solution for a really, really good shared public facility and how it worked out. Appreciate all that.
Terrific. Well, if there's no further discussion, then is there a motion on item 11?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Congratulations. Thank you. All right, item 12 is consideration of Resolution 18-74, an appropriation of flood in lieu impact fee funds for the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency, WSAFCA, Bridgeway Drain Improvement Project in an amount not to exceed $1 million. Mr. Blumberg.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, the item you're considering tonight with Resolution 1874 is a proposal to appropriate $1 million in flood in lieu funds and to authorize the transfer to WSAFCA for a project known as the Bridgeway Drain Improvement Project. It's a $3.4 million project that's already underway, but I want to go over some of the reasons why we're making that recommendation to you. Number one, the project was one of those projects that just came up. You had the winter storms in January 2018 that created some damage to the Deepwater East levee, and a lot of that had to do with the landward side of the levee where the internal drainage was insufficient. And so this project was intended to address those drainage conditions, move water away from that levee, and ensure that the damage does not occur again. So as an internal drainage project, it's typically the type of project that we look to use flood in lieu fees for. And so it's an appropriate use of the funds. There's a substantial fund balance in the flood in lieu impact fees, so there's money there to do that. And then finally, as we meet with a flood manager with a comprehensive cash flow model on a monthly basis, we look at both near, medium, and long-term cash flows for not only the Southport Levee project, which is the biggest one, but also other needs of West Safka in terms of the federal project that's coming along and other levee repair projects that are now kind of in design and engineering phase. So in appropriating the funds, we think that it's going to be a portion of the overall project cost, but it's an appropriate contribution to that project. So Greg Fabin's here if you have questions specifically about the project, and I can handle any questions you have about the financing.
I have a few. So I don't quite understand why. So this kind of we created the flood in lieu fee for the purpose of developing a local funding source for what would ultimately be the $1 billion plus GRR-driven federal project. The full post-Katrina piece. It wasn't the flood in lieu fee was not intended to be essentially an augmentation of the existing flood assessment to support the work of the reclamation districts in West Africa, but it was specifically for the purpose of doing what was at the time and what remains a massive project that required a significant local match. So I'm just curious. So I'm trying to understand I mean, you said we have a balance, but we have a balance because we have hundreds of millions of dollars of upcoming projects, which we expect and the federal government will be the primary funder of, but we're not off the hook for those future projects either. So could you describe this the cash situation and why this isn't more appropriately dealt with through the assessment, the property assessment that we've always paid here in the city for the purpose of maintaining the flood and internal drainage system?
Certainly. With flood and low impact fees, we fall under the Mitigation Fee Act, or AB 1600, and there are issues related to the collection of impact fees and a time limit when you have to spend those fees. So in other words, you have 5 years from when a dollar comes in for it to go out the door. You can't hold on to them. So one of the concerns that we identified last year when we did our annual report on development impact fees was we had, some revenues there that were aging, and so they were bumping up against that 5-year window. And so by spending these funds on internal drainage, we can contribute to that overall goal of providing flood protection for the city comprehensively, but we could also take care of that aging problem by moving some of those funds now. Now, one of the issues is there any other competing project right now for those funds that we could identify, other than the larger project, as you noted. We will have other projects coming out of the storm drain master plan, which is now being prepared and would come to the city council for approval in late 2019. There will be a number of projects coming out of that master plan, which will also be a priority use for things like flood and lieu funds, until we find some other funding source for those storm drain projects. So, the biggest reason would be, moving funds because we can't hold on to them.
Okay, that makes sense, and I wasn't aware that we were on that kind of a time clock on this. The storm drain piece, though, I'm plant a flag on it, because our number 1, 2, and 3 priority is flood protection. So even if there's not sufficient funding for the storm drain master plan, if it's not delivering that flood system, that's somebody else's problem, not the flood and lieu fee, to solve. Until we have the full appropriation from the federal government to match up the authorization that we've gotten for the full project from the federal government, and we have to make sure every penny that we've created through these funding sources for those levy projects remains available for them. So I guess the second question that on this one, given the timing, so it seems like we're essentially borrowing, or we're lending out the flood fees, the impact fees, so that we can use them for the same purpose later on in the larger flood project.
Yes.
Essentially, later on, it's just instead of 5 years from now or 2 years from now, the next large project, including X amount of money in lieu fees and X amount from local flood assessment and X amount from the feds, the flood assessment piece would be bigger and the flood and lieu fee portion might be smaller.
That's correct, Mayor.
So, but we don't control the assessment, because the assessment is a West Africa assessment, and we're ably represented there. But we don't control that. So do we have an assurance that from West Africa that those funds will be an amount equivalent to the flood and lieu fees will be exclusively dedicated to that project and not to something else?
What I may say is the council can condition their action tonight, but it still needs to go to the West Africa board. And so in November, assuming the council takes an action tonight, they would have the action receiving the funds, and any conditions or notes you would add to that recommendation we could bring along at that time.
Yeah, I think Greg also wanted to supplement.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. If I could provide a little bit more continuity or broader description of what the funds will be used for. The ultimate solution for the Deepwater Ship Channel East levee repairs would include removal of the ditch, which removes the under seepage characteristics that currently exist with that ditch residing right alongside the toe of the levee. So the ultimate fix removes the ditch. And by doing so now, we're going to ultimately reduce the overall cost of the fix of that levee system. So part of this is an investment in reducing the overall cost of the program. The current estimate for the repairs of that stretch includes slurry walls, much like we're doing in Southport. With the removal of the ditch and going to a pipe system, not only do we return the positive drainage to the Bridgeway Lakes area, but we also removed the under-seepage issue, and slurry walls are no longer required. So it significantly reduces the cost of the future fix of that project. So it's a good investment that Wasafe is undertaking now, which pays significant dividends later on.
And will it improve our VCR?
Potentially? Everything that we do along those lines improves the BCR.
Okay,
So
I'm
that
for it.
that is
Okay.
one of
Yeah,
the,
that's-
that is one of the
that's gonna be- I was
goals.
gonna say, it has
Done.
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right, other questions or comments or discussion?
Nope.
All right, then is there a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 13 is consideration of a regular update on the pilot on-demand rideshare service and workshop on the 6-month via rideshare user survey.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Sarah Strand, Associate Transportation Planner in Public Works. The purpose of my presentation tonight is to give a more substantial update on the VIA rideshare service to date, as well as to solicit your input on a draft 6-month user feedback survey. So just to kind of dive into it, there's a good amount of information in your report, as well as a number of attachments, but I'm going to focus on just the key takeaways, and if you have any other questions, I'm happy to take those at the end. From the highest level, things are going well. Ridership is exceeding what was expected prior to launch. The ridership information included in your report is through the first week of October, and it was roughly around 18,500 rides completed. Since then, we have exceeded 20,000 rides. There are 3,000 VIA accounts open in the city right now. And in terms of average daily ridership, prior to launching, VIA's estimates were much closer to around 200 a day, and we are already seeing more than closer to 50% of that ridership starting to crest on 300 rides on average a day. Of the overall ridership, something interesting that we've observed is that about 15% of riders have a senior or disabled rider discount, which is actually fairly reflective of the overall population. And about 20% of all rides taken on VIA so far have used a VIA pass. In addition, we've watched, as you know, early on in this program, there were a much lower rate of shared bookings and shared rides, and we've seen that healthily grow over the course of the pilot so far. And just as a reminder, the difference between booked rides versus shared bookings versus shared rides is shared bookings is when, two potentially strangers are matched by the algorithm into a vehicle, versus shared rides can be strangers or people who choose to ride together as a group in one vehicle. And so 30%, so 1 in 3 roughly via rides have completely separate riders being matched into the same vehicle. And more than half of all rides have at least 2 passengers or more in the vehicle. And of course, that's not including the driver. And then lastly, in terms of repeat ridership, which was a question that was brought to me by the council last time, over half of users who have opened up an account have taken 3 or more rides. The other thing that we're seeing in the data so far that is of interest is shown in these 2 charts. The estimated time of use pattern, this is the image of demand throughout the day that VIA thought was going to be the case here prior to launching in West Sacramento. And it was based on their experience in their other markets. And as you can see, it has a AM and PM peak that's mostly aggregated around commute times. As you can also see, the actual time of use pattern in West Sacramento has been completely inverse of that. So our highest demand period is actually in the middle of the day between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. But also to note is that we just have a very steady stream of demand throughout the day is what we're seeing. So we don't have a huge drop off on either end of that. So then just drilling down a little bit more into ridership over the course of the pilot. As you know, it's a 1-year pilot. We're just getting through about 5 months. And as you also know, we went into the full launch on June 18th. So really in earnest, we're looking at about around 4 months of solid data here. And as you can see, growth has continued week on week. We do have a couple of small dips. One was the week of September 3rd, and that's just attributable to the holiday closure on Labor Day. And then the past couple of weeks, September and the first week of October, we did see a little minor dip, and we speculate that was likely because the first 2 free rides promotion ended on September 30th. But what is not included in your report is that the week of October 8th, we've seen that bounce right back. So we do see growth continuing organically now that some of those promotions have ended. And a note kind of overall on where we're at with this project is we're really starting to pivot away from the very aggressive marketing and promotions and starting to lighten up on some of the promotions. And we're going to be observing some of the more organic growth that will come with this as people are being asked increasingly to pay full fares. And then on the bottom here, in terms of monthly ride requests, October looks a lot shorter because we're not finished with the month, obviously, but we are well on track to surpass ridership in September. Now that we're actually developing a more robust data set, we've also been able to dig a little bit deeper and observe where are the real hotspots and destinations in the community, so where are people using VIA to get to. I do want to note that the data, the visuals that you see in these charts, they don't show any locations with less than 50 rides being requested to those, and they are kind of clustered and aggregated up to protect people's privacy, so you can't pinpoint any specific location. But generally, as we've known from the earlier months, commercial centers are very much the most popular location riding VIA. The River Point Plaza, the Southport Town Center are some of the top on the list. But interestingly, we've also started to see demand grow in some other perhaps unexpected areas. For example, the high school has begun to emerge as a key hotspot for riders. And we're also seeing some clustering around Southport Elementary and the new Lighthouse Charter School, which is an interesting thing to note. In addition to that, we are seeing some major employers starting to track on our demand areas. So obviously CalSTRS and the Ziggurat building contribute a lot, but the Stillwater Business Park area has also emerged. So we know Amazon and Bayer Crop Sciences and some of those businesses are participating in the VIA program. Another item in response to direction from council at the last regular update was to provide a better summary of some of the customer feedback that is coming in. First, I'll just touch on a couple of kind of the key complaints or challenges that we've been addressing over the course of the pilot so far. One was related to the support line, which is also used to call and book rides. We did receive a number of complaints that some folks were having trouble getting through to the support line, especially in the mornings. After digging into that a little bit more with the VIA team, they've basically come to the determination that their current vendor, which is outsourced to a third party, is not living up to our expectations, our service standards. So they're going to be switching to a new provider at the end of the month. That will not impact our project budget at all, and it won't change the VIA support phone number. So nobody's going to have to learn a new phone number. In addition, we do offer door-to-door service for special circumstances, primarily when someone has a disability that prevents them from walking 200 to 500 feet to meet a VIA van. And the way that that is requested right now is if somebody is requesting a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, it will automatically route to their door. But if someone is not requesting a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, they need to call the support line and make a special request for that service. And they have to do that every time, which creates a cumbersome process for both the user, and there's also some inefficiencies about how it gets routed to the driver. So that's something that VIA is working with us on, to be able to customize user profiles and vet people and then give them automatic door-to-door service where that's appropriate to provide. I did include some quotes up here just based on feedback. I'm not going to read them all to you guys, but the top one very much sums up the feedback we're getting, which is that we have so many different facets of our community using it via teens, seniors, people without cars, folks who want to hit up a restaurant or watering hole and not worry about parking. It's wonderful. So overall, we're getting really positive feedback from the community on the service. So then shifting gears into the workshop on the survey that staff is proposing to deploy soon. I do want to just upfront clarify the difference. This 6-month user survey is not intended to replace the broader and much more robust survey that will be deployed by UC Berkeley as part of the final performance evaluation. The intention behind this is really to just be a very short, easy-to-take survey to help us get a pulse on who's writing and what types of reasons they're using the service for. And so for that reason, the questions are oriented around collecting the following data points: people's frequency of use, their trip purpose, their modal profile. And what I mean by that is just, do they only ever drive other than take VIA, or are they the type of person that use lots of other modes? They use jump bikes, bike on their own, walk. We're also going to be asking some questions to understand mode shift. So what would they have taken if they didn't ride VIA? We're going to ask them if they were a participant in the AARP scholarship program that the city manager's office has been working on, so that we can cross-reference some of that data with that study. We're going to ask them about driving restrictions, smartphone usage, some very basic demographic and socioeconomic information, and then lastly, we'll present them with an opportunity, kind of open-ended, to provide feedback on the service or leave us some comments. We're planning on distributing the survey in 2 ways, both electronically and in hard copy, primarily by emailing it out to all of the existing VIA users, which we have over 3,000 of, and then by putting paper surveys actually in the VIA vans. So just to reiterate, this is really geared towards existing users, so we won't be trying to collect information from any non-users of the VIA program at this time. And then lastly, to encourage participation in the survey, we will be offering people the chance to enter to win one of 4 $25 gift cards if they fully complete the survey. And in terms of timeline, we're hoping to get this pushed out by the end of the month or early November and keep the survey open probably for the entire month of November. So then I just want to add a few other things, other news and updates about VIA. We will be holding another Learn to Ride event tomorrow night at the VFW Post 9498 on Lisbon Avenue, and that's going to be from 5 to 8 p.m. Any community member is welcome to come. It's a free event, and we'll be available to help people get set up with accounts, apply for a senior or disabled discount, or answer any questions or take feedback on the service. On November 6th, VIA will be doing a promotion for dollar rides to polling locations, similar to some of the other TNCs out there. And then VIA does close for holidays, so just a reminder to everyone that VIA will be closed from November 22nd to 24th and December 22nd to January 1st. And as a side note, those are historically very low ridership days for VIA and their other markets, so it's kind of a conservative thing to do. The VIA Pass has been running very successfully at very, very aggressively priced rates, and those were promotional rates that will need to be increased eventually, and so we will be starting to get information out to the public on some of those rate increases. They will not be too substantial. We're looking at probably $15 for a regular fare, which is $7.50 for the senior or disabled. And then lastly, VIA did announce to staff that they are also joining some of the other companies out there and entering into the electric scooter share industry. They haven't shared any details about this with us at this time, but with council direction, we'd be happy to come back and share any information that VIA provides. They have expressed an interest in working with any of their partner cities on their new scooter business. And then looking ahead, what council can expect at future updates, of course, continual reporting and monitoring of the service, but we're going to be starting to transition to really dig into some of the fiscal analysis around what will year 2 look like in terms of cost, as well as playing with some scenarios around various types of expansion, both geographic or temporal, so that the city council will be well equipped to make some of those decisions. And then, of course, we'll be working with UC Berkeley to dig into the final performance evaluation soon, and we'll be increasingly starting to coordinate some of the data and findings from this pilot with the Mobility Action Plan and with YCTD, as they also are going to be kicking off a comprehensive operational analysis soon. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and would respectfully request any feedback that the City Council has on the survey at this time or questions on the update at large.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
I wasn't quite ready, but okay. So thanks for the update. And, This is, I think, I don't want to say it's been a total surprise this has taken off. But seeing the number that it's exceeded by 50% the projections of VIA was truly a number that just kind of jumped out at me. I thought maybe it was 20 to 30% increase over what we projected, but more so, you feel it, right? As you see people using it, you hear stories of people using it, and people trying it, and who have come to just adopt it. This has been, along with jump bikes, a totally transformative solution. And staff, you guys have really killed it on this one, just by, the service and the way we've structured it and deploying it in a way, planning and deploying it in a way, and certainly, getting our guidance, but in a way that has been quickly adopted and accessible by everybody. So kudos to staff on that. But the other part too is just around the way you've gone about it, how you've done it. So I've just, on a personal level, I've been told by 2 or 3 folks that I get a problem, I call Sarah. And Sarah just quickly figures out how I get somebody to dial them up. So, and to the drivers, I've heard lots of compliments from the drivers, of the drivers. And the drivers that I've experienced love driving in West Sacramento. And they've gotten their regulars now. And it's really, that's the part of the pilot that I was not expecting. Just all of a sudden, they become the kind of the fabric of our community. So it's right away, it's already starting to, I'm feeling the success rate from that. But I do have some questions about the service and kind of, I know some next steps in the survey that I'll get to, and then some final comments. But first on the survey, and it's just, when the email to users and to asking them to fill a survey. So I'm just thinking out loud, but depending on the survey questions and what we're looking, the level of data we're looking for, it would seem to me that could we not deploy the survey through the app itself and being able to just quickly ask questions, give ratings. I mean, we're able to give our drivers ratings every time. And is that something that could be pushed out through the app so folks could, again, on their ride, they know we're in the ride, and just, it may be worth asking while you're in the car, can you take a 5-question survey? Again, it might be worth thinking about, because we still need a paper survey for those who don't have a phone, or those that just want to fill out the paper, but maybe a thought rather than email is just a different experience. But again, I get why you would do it, and it just was a thought. I know some of the stats you had brought, if you go back, the demographic, you were showing that, I want to say it's 15% of the rides had senior passes, and then another 30%, I think, had discount rates. But those could be seniors or young folks in both those categories, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, so it's people who have applied a senior or disabled rider discount to their code, just based on experience of signing up. Majority of these people,
Right.
I can say it's majority of older adults in the community.
Yeah.
But there is a mix, and you could also qualify that with the fact that some people
So
may
that-
not have gotten the discount yet.
Right, so that would come out in the survey, being able to get some of that demographics to see how many are, because you can look at the usage time that you articulated, but my guess is that's what's driving it. And kids going to the school, which I've heard, I've gotten into a couple times with kids on their way to a friend's house or on their way to band practice or something now. So, okay, and then I don't know if I have any more specific input on questions on the survey or we're going. I did hear of one thing, I don't know if you did it or, but a service that I heard from a user who I think they spoke to you, but apparently coordinating with, because one of the hotspots was the Walmart, going to the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And that somebody had gone there to tell Walmart that seniors may show up and they may need to use the phone. And so I think, were you the one who kind of set that up? Or somebody had said they had done that when they dropped off a senior, and to make sure they know they're going to come to you and let them use the phone or call for them. And Walmart said, yeah, we'll take care of that. But that was a really good best practice, because what I've, again, the seniors told me, they were afraid to go to the store because they were afraid they don't have a phone, and they were not going to, they were afraid to ask somebody, and the phone wouldn't be available to them. So just kind of a best practice might be to ensure there's a communication to some of these high-frequency drop-offs, that if somebody needs to use the phone to contact them, either a placard they can put in there to say, whatever, Previa riders go here or something. But it might be worth doing, because somebody was really fearful of going to the store till somebody went and said, hey, you need to help them dial up. So that was some feedback I got a couple of weeks ago. But I'm, like I said, I have been astonished. I was actually at the community center today and said hello to some of the seniors, and I was just floored by every one of them. They love the service. And in fact, somebody was there today who was the one that was quoted in one year earlier, who is now happy to be buying ice cream.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I ran into her today, and she's just ecstatic about the fact that she has this service now and can get to the store and buy ice cream. And another woman who was there who just ordered her Via when I got there, and in a wheelchair. And I met her before because she would get meals at the old senior center on Cummins, where she would come, but she's in a wheelchair now, and she uses it now. And the driver was so nice, came, picked her up, and other seniors that I saw there were they loved the service. And that's just one part of the story, and then other people who have used it for commuting or to get to La Costa or to get to Raleigh Field, whatever. It's been an overwhelming sort of feeling. In fact, we were at dinner at La Costa last week, and one of the servers came up and just stopped because she heard us talking about it and said, I would not be able to hold my job here if it wasn't for Via. Like, I would not be able to work if it wasn't for Via, because it gets me from Southport up to, I think she's from Southport. It gets me here, I don't have to worry about parking, I don't have a car, and it gets me here on time. And that was just, that's where this service has come. And in my mind, this is one of the better things. I mean, we do a lot of good things. Today was a great example, but this service and identifying it, and especially at a time when I'm on the transit board trying to figure out how we're going to re-gear a very old model of transit of getting around, how can we re-gear that, and knowing what we know now, it just puts more imperative that we got to do that. And that was a large part of our conversation at the transit district meeting last week, is that the imperative to change is now here. We cannot just have empty buses running around town and in the city contributing $2 million plus a year in our transit dollars to that. It's a harder and harder sell to me and as representative of all the folks that pay their taxes, and when I go around and I see so many people now being able to get around in a friendly way. The only caution I have is just I know we got to bump up pricing. That comes at a time when the district is talking about lowering pricing, and just to be able to communicate that well in advance so people can plan. I think that would be, I think they all know. In fact, one of the riders I met today was just absolutely giddy about the pass she gets every week for, what's the senior weekly pass? $5. Yeah, and that's, she uses it all the time, and this rate increase coming, I don't know how that will land on her when she depends on it, but just to keep that in mind and start getting that word out. I know that's part of the deal, but it was a promotional thing. But anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandin.
Thank you for the update, and,
Dr. Sandin on this topic.
No, that's okay. When you launch a pilot, you're hoping for we were hoping for the best and hoping that it was successful, but this is, I think, a lot, in large part, to your efforts and working with VIA and tweaking this and coming up with ideas when getting feedback, trying to come up with solutions. I just think it's so successful that I think it's exciting to think about how we can sustain it. And the pricing thing and issues and how to fund this will come up in the long term. But for now, I mean, it is amazing. And the testimonials that we're hearing and you've showed us, and I hear them too. People, you see the van and people are excited to have some West Sac way of getting around. With regard to your question about the survey, one of the things that came to mind, and I think when you mentioned the calling from people calling from a store, I'm imagining some riders are visually impaired, and so trying to figure out how to capture their information, because they may really rely on this more than anyone else, because if you have visual impairments and can't drive at all, you really don't have other options. And then the other thing I was thinking about was sometimes gathering information from the people who are close to this, doing this every day, like the drivers. I don't know if that is, I'm sure you are getting information from them, but I don't know if there's a way to systematically kind of glean their suggestions, because I think they probably they're living this every day, so they may have some good ideas for us as well.
Mr. Johansson?
Well, thank you. Yeah, just a couple of questions. On the training, including the upcoming training that you've got, I think that's really critical for particularly folks that are kind of technology challenged. But is what you're doing, do you think it's sustainable in terms of the amount of personnel that's required? And are you looking at maybe some kind of model that could, for example, giving coupons to trainers to train, that kind of thing, that would allow that to continue with less staff involvement?
Yeah, and I think that's precisely something that we're trying to learn through the AARP study that John Robinson from the City Manager's Office is heading up. So that's looking at a variety of different incentive and education levels, and what are most effective, and exactly what type of staff personnel would be required to kind of reach that level of success that we'd like to. So yeah, I think we'll be happy to bring back some of the findings from that study as we move forward.
Okay. And the other question is it's obviously folks are relying on this more and more. We may have had this discussion in the past, but when does the conversation start? What happens after the year? And, how is this going to continue, or will it continue? 6 months into the process, or has the conversation already started?
Yeah, so preliminarily, the conversation has started, but we don't have enough concrete data to give answers on that yet. So through the winter is the next 2 to 3 months is when we're really going to be crunching those numbers and developing a few different scenarios to bring back to the council alongside the performance evaluation report in advance of the pilot's, term end in May.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Roscoe.
Thank you. A month ago, I remember sitting here, and I couldn't even imagine that this program could have happened. I remember your presentation. I liked it very much. But it wasn't in my realm of possibilities because I hadn't seen it yet, other than, Uber and Lyft. But, the idea of having something specific to West Sacramento just was kind of beyond the scope of what I was willing to accept. And so it's interesting to see where we've come, because now I think Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma said it's been integrated into the fabric of our community, and I agree with that so much, because now I just have grown to expect the VIA vans everywhere, and I see how much enjoyment people in our community have experienced. But also I just have to commend your work and VIA for becoming true community partners. When you have a third Saturday swarm hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, and you see 100 VIA rides being, offered as a prize, I think, wow, that's pretty incredible. When you see a Mediterranean food festival that's been historic in our community for the past several years, and you have VIA there and voting, I mean, these are things that really do put a mark on the impressions of our people. And it really goes to show, when you have a driver that gets to know the folks that he or she is picking up, then it just becomes routine, and it becomes a really cool amenity that's just not, something that's not foreign. And so I am really pleased to have the opportunity to see this transition and transform into something so valuable. Thank you for all the work and the energy that you've put into this. I like listening to the comments. I think, I was even envisioning a tablet that maybe the driver had in the, an iPad or something like that, where you have a captive audience, for crying out loud, while they're going to their destination. If you had a short survey, they could just punch it in right there. But I just, I find it magnificent to sit from this position and see a policy that has been so successful. And I do credit you and your team and VIA for making that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to present on this a month ago to mayors from around the country, mostly cities bigger than us. We're definitely leading the way. The mayor of Arlington was supposed to be there as well. That's the other city that's doing it citywide with VIA. The blend of both the outcome metrics and some of the demand metrics, plus the stories, many of which we've all said are in Sarah's report, are very compelling. And I think this is one of the big leaps forward that the community's taken in mobility, but also mobility as a pathway to employment, to internships, to ending social isolation, to supporting small business and community activities, all these other things that make a community what it is. And I'm not going to pile on all the praise, because I did the same last time for Sarah and the team, but also to turn it backwards, because the combination of a council with someone who wrote a doctoral dissertation on this topic, and the Mayor Pro Tem's deep leadership on this at the transit level, and the numbers and understanding how travel is happening, and the age-friendly work that both of you chaired. That all of that is shining through this process in the way that it's been deployed smartly and humanly in ways that really make sense. And in the community, because there are not a lot of cities where the norm would be, there's this thing I'm going to stop driving and just try this new thing. People here in West Sacramento, one of the reasons why we're successful is that people enjoy trying things out and doing something different and exploring and seeing what else is out there. So a lot of people have contributed to making this success. And I actually the only outstanding question from a sustainability perspective for me is, does this work for VIA or for some other VIA-like company? It's pretty clear, if we had to, the level of subsidy that we're currently putting into this, either compared to our reserves for transit or compared to what we're spending on 2 empty buses and YOLO bus, that this is a completely sustainable, viable concern going forward. The question is, we don't know yet whether it makes sense for our private sector partner or not, which will be a key one. So I wanted to dig into some of the hard knuckles issues. One, I think the staff report notes that there was a software problem where you get an error message saying there's no rides available, and that's now fixed. No, it's not fixed. I get that almost every 1 out of 3 or 4 rides. There's no vehicles available. That's a problem for if you go somewhere and you can't, and you're not sure you're going to get back. So if it said you're going to have to wait 45 minutes, I might be upset, but at least I know I am going to get home. There's no rides anywhere in the entire city. Try again later. Best of luck to you is a challenge. So I don't think that was it's been an ongoing problem really from the launch, in terms of the demand. And it's not necessarily that you need more rides, although that would be great. But that response to a customer is that's very worrisome to realize that not only there's no ride, but you're not even getting an estimate that there might someday be one. Maybe related to that is I love the drivers a lot, and for many of the reasons that have been said, but I'm a little curious or maybe concerned about their customer service oriented. Virtually every ride I've been in, the driver has wanted to essentially say, forget what the VIA app, what the VIA system is telling me. I'm going to take you directly to the door. Very, very common, and that is from a user perspective, that's fantastic. But the system cannot run that way. I mean, efficiently, and it's one of the reasons then why you can't get a ride. Or the ride says it's going to be there in 5 minutes, but it really takes 11 because the vans are not following the algorithm that are the essence of how this system is supposed to be more efficient than an Uber or a Lyft. So if the drivers convert it to a Lyft system, then it no longer becomes financially sustainable, and it becomes, for other users, it becomes an unreliable system. So I don't know how endemic it is, or maybe it's just because I'm in the car and the drivers, for whatever reason, might suspect that there's, somebody from city council there, and so they're being extra nice. But it's not just with me. So I would encourage you to with VIA and with the drivers, to just explore that and help them understand that the efficiency of dropping off at collector streets and arterials is to make sure that the next person waiting is waiting a reasonable amount of time and can get a ride at all. And I think, I mentioned this a couple times before, the VIA GPS software in terms of time estimation is still could use quite a bit of work and/or training. Because it's usually, it will often, if I hail a ride right now and the driver is in Bridgeway Lakes, it will almost always say 5 minutes away, 6 minutes away, and no, right? Yeah, so these are not fatal flaws, but as a constant user issue, or if you're using it because you're going to an appointment-based sort of thing, either at the doctor or elsewhere. And so you need to know once you've clicked yes, purchase this ride, that it's somewhere within the ballpark. That becomes increasingly important. And maybe it's just a question of the system getting trained over time better, but it is a bit of a user challenge in that way. I guess more fundamentally, we've talked about it as an amenity, but for the projects that Charlene is agreeing to let not have as much parking as otherwise would have, including places like West Gateway Place, which has like 5,000 cars per unit now, just folks parking on every possible street in the whole area. VIA is not just an amenity. Its principal intention is to make it possible for folks to live, work, and play in the city without owning, or if they own, without using their car. That's fundamental, but that's a lifestyle. And so I worry about Sundays, but I really worry about 10 days in December where you cannot get a ride. So if I don't have a car and I'm at Valhalla Mobile Home Park and I have all year, I use VIA to go to the market. I use VIA to remain to not be isolated at the holidays, which is the most isolating mental health-wise. The holidays are the worst. If I can't get to the supermarket, if I can't get to the rec pool, or if I can't do all the things in life for 10 days, that seems like a very extended period of time for something that's not a luxury. But if we've tried to create the context in which you don't have to have a car, and then suddenly every year that you do for all of the Thanksgiving week plus the 10 days at the Christmas New Year's holiday. I just think it's easy for us to overlook, for those of us that have a car and, well, okay, I'll just drive that time. But this service is intended to, yes, be that, but also be a full-on replacement for having to own a car or being able to afford to own a car in the first place. So I would ask that you just, with VIA, have a conversation about it. I get we can't run the service every single day at the same rate. But it's a long time to go without being able to go to the supermarket, just and get any ice cream at all. So, yes, Councilmember Sandy.
Sorry, I was thinking about when you were mentioning that period of time without that, and I thought, gosh, folks now are using an app, so they might switch over to Uber or Lyft or another service. And then I was wondering if coming back, do we lose people from that period of time off because they've substituted something to get around during that period of time? Anyway, that had crossed my mind as well. Just because that would be, now you have a new way of getting around, and so you can flip around to other ways.
That's definitely something that we can look at, shortening that break, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Yeah, the isolation piece, I was struck when we did the AARP workshop, and we were extolling all the things that you could go to with VIA, and there were the two women here from Valhalla Mobile Home Park, and for them, the most exciting prospect of VIA was they had not in years thought about the possibility of being able to simply call a friend and have lunch spontaneously that day with their friends. That was because, paratransit, you have to make a reservation, it's a whole big deal, whatever, but just the ability to spontaneously go have lunch with it. In terms of dealing with the isolation issues that, not just for seniors, but certainly among the aging population in the city, it's the most profound, that especially at the holidays, it becomes problematic. So the last thing I wanted to probe on more is the survey, because as I was reading the staff report, I'm like, that sounds like a good idea, a quick 3 to 5 question survey. And then I actually turned to the survey, and I thought, oh my God, this is a really long, this is like the census. short form, but still this census, there's a lot going on in here. And it seems unreasonable, even a paper survey, even a tablet survey in the actual ride, unless I'm going from Bright Park to Bridgeway Lakes Park, I'm not going to finish this. And there's each of the questions is a lot of choices. Like do you use Via to go to work, or do you use it solely for trips to the veterinarian or whatever? It's very, very, very specific, which means you have to consume and read a lot of things to get to it. And I would just urge that in addition to all the things that have been said earlier about other ways of delivering, which most of those other ways would force us to really get it down to the brass tacks. What do we really need to know? But really take a look, backwards engineer the survey from what we might actually do with the information. And especially during a pilot. If people answer this, well, are we really, is this actionable information? Do we really need it, or are we just curious? I would love to know all this. I am very curious about these things. But in terms of are we actually going to use it, I'm not so convinced. So I would try to start from the policy making or the operations changes, and then work backwards at the actual questions that are necessary, and maybe just start with, if you did an app-based thing or in ride piece of paper that's one sheet of paper instead of 7, with just 3 questions or something that would allow you to start, and that will also allow you to test the proclivities of riders to actually provide the feedback in the first place. Because if you don't get that many responses out of 3,000 eligibles, if you don't get that many responses, all this fine-grained detail is not going to be useful anyway, because you're not going to have a large enough sample size. So I thought the ideas that have already been shared have been great, but I think overall I would just shrink the survey down quite a bit and really focus on not sort of the academic stuff that we will want to know and that UC Berkeley should be looking at too, but what do we need to know right now for decisions that we need to be making right now. All right, do you have sufficient feedback?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, great work. Council calendar, Ms. Berlin.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, council members. Earlier this week, our city manager sent out a nice table of some upcoming events that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be pretty busy with events, but I wanted to highlight a few of those, including some that are actually on the calendar in your packet. Coming up tomorrow is Drake's at the Barn Preview Night event, and a VIP email went out earlier this week. So if you guys are interested in attending that, please RSVP. That's tomorrow from 5 to 9 at the barn. Next Wednesday is, I haven't mentioned it yet, which I'm really surprised, is the YED Fall 2018 event. That's in the Galleria at 4 o'clock, and the theme for the event this fall is community engagement, and our own John Robinson will be one of the featured speakers. Then on the 29th at 5:30 will be the Mill Street Pier art unveiling and barn celebration, and that's at 5:30. Then there'll be a YOLO Habitat Conservancy signing ceremony on Tuesday, October 30th at 10 a.m. at the Riverwalk Park. Then on Tuesday, the 30th at 12:30, there's a West Sacramento Home Run CSA program launch, and that's going to be at Stonegate Elementary. And then Wednesday, October 31st at 10 is the I Street Bridge Replacement Architect announcement. And that's at the Matsui Waterfront Park in Sacramento. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Questions on the calendar? City manager report?
No report tonight, but I did want to mention one thing. I wish I didn't have to do this, but I want to recognize, thank, and congratulate Edgar Medina, one of our senior civil engineers, who unfortunately is leaving the city for another opportunity, but he's done a great job while he's been here. Most recently, finishing up, I think, what will go down as one of the most transformative projects in the city's history, which is the Washington Grand Gateway Infrastructure Project. So just want to, since he's here, want to thank Edgar and wish him well. We know where to find you.
It's too bad. One more week and you would have had a park named after you, but oh well. Sorry. Any questions for city manager report? Thanks, Edgar. City attorney report.
Nothing to report.
Staff direction for members of the council. We have no future agenda item requests. So Mr. Johannesson moves and Ms. Sandine seconds that the council be adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.